The doorbell rang, the familiar sound signaling another customer had just entered Sunny Lane Bistro. Amara, a 32-year-old waitress, was clearing the last table of the day, looking up as usual, intending to smile a greeting. But her gaze froze, her hands still clutching the dish towel, unable to move. A stranger had just entered, but not a stranger at all. It was Elon Musk. Yes, Elon Musk, the man the whole world knows, walked in with a calm appearance but carried an aura that made the whole small restaurant stop. He wore a dark jacket. His hair was a bit messy. His face was thoughtful but still exuded an indescribable confidence. Amara blinked a few times, not daring to believe what she was seeing. Is it really him? She wondered, her heart starting to beat faster. Why was a billionaire, who was always on the news and at major events, standing right in front of her, in a small, obscure cafe? This was not a place where someone like him would normally hang out. A sense of unfamiliarity and curiosity washed over her. The regulars in the restaurant stopped talking as well. Their eyes turned toward the door, some whispering quietly, some looking surprised. Sunny Lane Bistro, where every night was a place of mundane conversation, was now the center of something different. The atmosphere in the restaurant became strange, almost so quiet that Amara could hear her own breathing. Elon didn't notice the attention he was attracting. He walked lightly past the rows of old wooden tables, his eyes scanning the space around him, and chose a small table near the window. He sat down, his chin resting on his hand, his eyes looking out at the dark street. He seemed lost in thought, as if he didn't notice the presence of the people around him. Amara stood behind the counter, trying to control her breathing. She couldn't stop the questions from running through her head. Why is he here? What is he doing here? Am I dreaming? But then she shook her head, reminding herself that this was not the time to get lost in her thoughts. He was a customer, and it was her job to serve him. She grabbed a tray, adjusted her familiar smile, and walked over to his table. Amara's heart was still pounding as she said, "Hello, how can I help you tonight?" Her voice was a little shaky, but she tried to keep her composure. Elon looked up, smiling softly. "A black coffee, and if you like, a piece of cheesecake." Amara nodded, quickly returning to the counter, but the strange feeling still lingered. She couldn't help but think that his presence would lead to something unusual. And she was right. Amara tried to keep her composure as she walked back to the bar. Her hands were still shaking as she measured out the coffee, but she reminded herself, he's just a customer. The steaming black coffee and cheesecake were placed neatly on the wooden tray. Taking a deep breath, she walked slowly toward Elon Musk's table, the eyes of the entire bar following her every move. "Thank you," Elon said, his voice warm as Amara set her coffee down on the table. "If you need anything else, just call me," she replied, trying to keep her voice light but unable to hide the tension. He nodded, smiling slightly before turning his thoughtful gaze back to the window. But the atmosphere in the cafe was no longer as quiet as before. Murmurs rose from the corners of tables, and regulars began to discuss the presence of this special guest. Questions flew around the cafe. Is it really Elon Musk? Why is he here? How strange, someone like him walking into Sunny Lane. Some people looked excited, but many more looked annoyed. For them, this small cafe was a place to escape the troubles and noise of the outside world. The appearance of a famous person like Elon seemed to disrupt that familiar space. In a corner of the cafe, Frank, an older man with a reputation for being outspoken, set down his newspaper and glared at Elon. Frank was a longtime regular at Sunny Lane, never shy about voicing his opinions. Elon's presence seemed to spark a long-suppressed anger. Frank stood up and walked slowly toward Elon's table, drawing the attention of everyone in the bar. Amara stood behind the counter, watching nervously. Her instincts told her this could not lead to anything good. "You're Elon Musk, right?" Frank said, loud enough for the whole bar to hear. Elon looked up, his expression as calm as ever. "Yes," he replied, his voice even. Frank crossed his arms over his chest, his eyes sharp. I heard you supported OpenAI, but now you're working on your own AI. Isn't that contradictory? Or do you just want to control everything for power? Frank's question made the room tense. The patrons stopped what they were doing, their eyes shifting from Frank to Elon, waiting for a reaction. A few nodded slightly, agreeing with Frank's question. Elon put down his coffee and looked straight at Frank, his gaze unwavering. I left OpenAI because I disagreed with their direction. I wanted to create AI that was more transparent, focused on truth and free from hidden agendas. That's why I founded XAI, he said, his voice calm but firm. Frank chuckled. That sounds nice, but I don't believe it. To me, you're just another guy after more power and more money. The tension in the bar was rising. Elon kept his composure, but Amara couldn't miss the tension in his eyes. She felt uneasy, weighed down by the unwarranted hostility from people she had once thought were approachable and warm. Things had changed, and Amara knew she had to do something. Frank stood across from Elon, his eyes piercing as if to penetrate the famous customer's thoughts. The entire bar seemed to be caught up in the tension between the two. The whispers had died down, replaced by an anxious silence. Everyone was waiting to see how Elon Musk would react to Frank's harsh criticism. Transparent? Frank said, sounding skeptical. I hear you say that, but what you're doing is just building another empire for yourself. Isn't OpenAI good enough? Why do you need to create something new? Or can't you stand not having complete control? Elon sighed softly, setting his coffee down on the table. He looked up at Frank, his gaze unwavering, but there was a hint of weariness in his gaze. He was used to criticism like this, but in the small, intimate space of Sunny Lane Bistro, it carried a different weight. I understand your concerns, Elon began, his voice low and calm, but I'm not leaving OpenAI for power or control. I'm leaving because I feel a responsibility to ensure that AI, a technology that has the potential to change the world, is developed in a way that serves humanity, not is driven by hidden interests. Frank sneered, cutting Elon off. So you're saying you're the only one who can do the right thing? You think you're the only one morally capable of leading? No. Elon replied immediately, his voice still calm. But I believe that everyone has a role to play. I can't sit idly by when I see this technology being abused. XAI isn't about competition. It's about providing an option, a transparent option where people can understand how it works and for what purpose. The entire bar held its breath. Elon's words carried the weight of reason, but Frank's skeptical gaze did not waver. So, you expect us to believe you just because you say so? Frank asked, his voice growing louder. To me, that's just the rhetoric of a billionaire protecting his own interests. Amara, standing behind the counter, felt her heart beat faster. The atmosphere in the cafe was tense. Frank's every word was like a knife stabbing into the silence. She couldn't help but look at Elon, who remained surprisingly calm, but Amara realized one thing. This was not the Elon Musk she usually saw on TV or in the newspapers. There was a hint of hurt in his eyes, a hint of fatigue, a very real human emotion. A few of the patrons nodded in agreement. Criticisms began to be whispered between tables, like a wave that spread quickly. Amara felt her heart tighten. She knew Sunny Lane was a place where people came to share, to relax, but now it had turned into a small arena where criticism and judgment were brought to a head. Elon took a sip of coffee, then looked up, his voice low, but clear and steady. I don't expect people to believe me right away, but I hope what I do speaks for itself. The world is constantly changing, and I just want to help make sure that the change is positive, not something we regret. The words brought a brief silence to the bar. Amara looked around, seeing the tension still there, but there was another emotion creeping in. Contemplation. But she also sensed that what was about to happen might be beyond her control. Amara stood behind the counter, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't one to meddle in other people's business, especially during heated debates like this. But there was something in Elon's eyes, weary but determined, that made it impossible for her to stand aside. This wasn't just a pointless argument. It was a moment when she felt the need to speak up, the need to get the facts straight. She stepped away from the counter, her hands clasping the towel, as if to steady her nerves. "Excuse me," she said, not loudly but loud enough to draw everyone's attention. The entire place fell silent, the eyes of the customers and Elon all on her. "I know this is your cafe," Amara began, her eyes sweeping over the familiar faces of the customers she had served over the years. "And I know Mr. Frank has every right to ask questions, but I think we need to look at things from a more even-handed perspective." Amara took a deep breath, then continued, her eyes shining with conviction. "We live in a time where technology is changing every day, and no one can deny how much it has improved our lives. We have smartphones, the internet, modern medicine, all thanks to people who dare to think differently, dare to explore and innovate. Without people like Elon Musk, would we be able to dream about space exploration or using technology to solve big problems like clean energy or transparent AI? A few people in the bar started whispering, but Amara didn't stop. She turned to Frank, her eyes not challenging, but pleading. "Frank, I'm not saying Elon is perfect because no one is, but I've read about what he's done, from supporting hospitals, helping children, investing in technologies that could change the future. We can't judge a person based on one look, one rumor. There has to be a balance, right?" The whole place was silent for a few seconds. Elon sat there, looking at Amara with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Clearly, he hadn't expected anyone, especially a waitress, to stand up for him in front of a group of strangers. Not everyone agreed, however. A woman sitting in the corner of the cafe spoke up skeptically. "But who knows what these billionaires' true intentions are? They can say one thing and do another." Some nodded, while others silently pondered Amara's words. Frank raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "That sounds good, Amara. But we're talking about a man with enormous power. Who's to say he won't use it for his own gain?" Amara felt her blood boil, but she kept her cool. "No one can guarantee that," she admitted. "But if we judge everything with suspicion, no one will ever try to change. Innovation always brings risks, but it also brings opportunities. I think trying to be transparent, as Elon said, is a step in the right direction." A few people in the tavern began to nod, their eyes seeming softer than before. But the atmosphere was still tense, as others still shook their heads, refusing to accept. Amara knew that she couldn't change everyone's minds, but she also felt that at least she had made her point clear. She turned to look at Elon, who smiled softly. Though he didn't say anything, his eyes seemed to say, "Thank you." In that moment, Amara didn't regret speaking up, even though she knew the consequences might not be pleasant. But sometimes the greatest innovations and revolutions come from daring to stand up for what you believe in. The air in Sunny Lane Bistro was heavy, as if Frank's criticism was still echoing in every corner. Suddenly, the door to the office behind the counter opened, and Mr. Miller, the owner, stepped out with a stern expression. He glanced around, his eyes landing on Amara. Just by looking at his expression, she knew something was wrong. "Amara, come in here," he said, his voice low but loud enough for the entire bar to hear. The regulars immediately turned their heads, curiously following him. Amara felt her whole body stiffen, as if all eyes were on her. She slowly walked towards him, her heart filled with anxiety. "Yes, Mr. Miller," Amara began, but he raised a hand to stop her. "I don't want any explanations," he said, his voice sharp. "What do you think you're doing? You're standing in the middle of the bar, arguing with my regulars, people I've been serving for years. Frank and the other customers are the reason this bar exists, and you just turned everything upside down." Amara stiffened, trying to contain her emotions. "Mr. Miller, I'm not trying to argue. I just think Elon Musk is being treated unfairly. I just want to defend a little bit of the truth." "Fair." Mr. Miller interrupted her, his voice becoming harsh. "This is not the place for you to preach about fairness or truth. This is a place for patrons to feel comfortable, not for you to make them unhappy. Your actions, however well-intentioned, have disrupted that." Amara took a step back, feeling the ground beneath her feet crumble. "Sir, I don't think this is as serious as—" Before she could finish her sentence, Mr. Miller continued, "I've made up my mind, Amara. You can finish today's shift, but from tomorrow on, we won't need you anymore." The words were like a blow to her pride. Amara stood there, stunned. Around her, some of the regulars bowed their heads, averting their eyes, while others, including Frank, looked pleased. A sense of injustice welled up in her, but she knew that no amount of explaining would change anything. Mr. Miller had made his decision, and she had no choice. Across the bar, Elon Musk stood up. He walked toward Amara, his eyes filled with guilt and appreciation. "Amara," he said, his voice low and sincere, "thank you for what you did today. Not everyone is brave enough to stand up for the truth, especially in a situation like this. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused you." Amara looked up at him, her eyes filled with sadness and pent-up emotion. "This isn't your fault," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "I only did what I thought was right." Elon nodded, giving a small but grateful smile. He turned and walked out the door, leaving the cafe in a heavy silence. The doorbell rang as he left, like a bell signaling the end of something important. Amara returned to the counter, her legs feeling weak. She tried to finish her shift, but her heart was in turmoil. She felt betrayed not only by her boss, but also by the regulars she had served for years. Yet a part of her knew she had done the right thing. Standing up for justice was never wrong, no matter the cost. The next morning, when Amara walked into Sunny Lane Bistro to pack up her things, she didn't expect anything but a sense of regret. But when the familiar doorbell rang, she looked up and froze. It was Elon Musk, standing in the doorway with a small but warm smile. The restaurant fell silent again, all eyes on him. Elon approached the counter, his eyes shining with sincerity. "Amara, I want to talk to you," he said. Amara blinked, surprised. She nodded and stepped closer, trying to keep her composure under the curious gazes of the other customers. Elon looked at her, his face filled with gratitude. "Yesterday, you did something that not many people are willing to do. Stand up for truth and justice, even if it got you in trouble. That says a lot about who you are. Honest, courageous, and compassionate. I am so grateful for that, Amara." Amara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. "Thank you, but I only did what I believed was right," she said, her voice a little choked. Elon smiled. "And that's why I think you'd be a great fit for my team. I'd like to offer you a job at my charity. We're always looking for people with a heart like yours, people who care about fairness and are willing to help others. It's not glamorous, but it's meaningful, and I believe it could be the beginning of a new journey for you." Amara could hardly believe her ears. She looked at him, trying to find a response, but all she could manage was one word. I am honored. Thank you." Elon nodded, his eyes filled with satisfaction. "You don't have to answer right away. Think about it, and my team will contact you." He turned and walked out of the cafe, but this time he left behind a different atmosphere. Admiration and gratitude from the onlookers. Amara stood there, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. She realized that standing up for what was right, no matter the cost, had given her a life-changing opportunity. We hope Amara and Elon's story has inspired you. What do you think about Amara's decision? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to Inspiring Hearts so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next videos.